finished with you, I ain't had no doubt. I don't care what them damn doctors say. Oh, that's all, my name is Brother Irving. Welcome to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Professor Amos Wilson, El-Haj Malik Al-Shabazz, the late great attorney at law Alton Maddox, Louis Ray Rivera, Brother Assar, Minister Khalid, Gil Noble, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Professor Simmons, Ivan Van Sertima, Renoko Rashidi, Miss Leola Maddox. And the funny thing about Miss Leola Maddox is she drove a very old car all the way from Teaneck, New Jersey. And she believed in bringing people together in honor of the United African Movement. So for the people that came out to the Zoom audience, please give yourself a great big hand. She was locked down, we had a few setbacks, but we're back. But Miss Leola Maddox came with her, and she believed in bringing people together. United African Movement and the speaking and conversation and talking, and it was excellent. So we will never want to forget these people, especially Miss Leola. But we meet here in honor of these. Now I'm going to bring the camera over to the Amos collection. Ladies and gentlemen, this is for Sababo and African World Info Systems. You have Blueprint for Black Power, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat toward a Reclamation of the African Mind, African-Centered Consciousness versus the New World Order, The Falsification of African Consciousness, Black on Black Violence, Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children in S.K. Damiana, The Bastardization of African Cosmology, and Sababu's latest, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat toward a Reclamation of the African Mind. And this is an excellent book because our minds need to be reprogrammed. So we have these books in honor of Sababu and African World Info Systems. So I have a lot of other books here that for the listening audience, you read, you get the infogram of the African Echoes Organization out of Newark, New Jersey.
The score went out again. Where are you going?
Got it now? Do you have it?
Yeah, we got it now, but it's in and out for some reason.
In and out, right? You got to find out what's up with that.
Can you hear now?
Sure.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay.
I guess we have to just keep checking to make sure we all get it.
Yeah.
Green, sit down, my brother. Yeah, man, you know it's good.
Right.
I'm going to water first.
Yeah.
Everything is smoking?
Yeah, trust.
You good?
Yeah.
Peace to the family. I
Peace.
want to first open up by asking the oldest person in the room for the opportunity to speak. Do I have the opportunity to speak?
Yes.
Thank you, my dear. In keeping with tradition and culture, it's always important and respectful to ask permission to speak before you speak, because it's always important to acknowledge those individuals who paved the way for you to be here. So thank you, Elder, for that. This evening, as you do know, this is the beginning of Black History Month, African History Month, as I would like to call it. And it's always important to acknowledge who you are and where you came from. And one of the things we have to take into consideration, you know, the enemy is not going to be the one that's going to acknowledge and pat you on the back about who you are. That's going to be your own personal responsibility. So first we want to, one, acknowledge Black History or African History Month. And we do that by acknowledging and sojourning with our ancestors. So with proper openings, I would like to pour a libation in recognition to those ancestors that came before us and made it possible for us to be here and to pioneer that way. I got a special, you know, inductee for ancestorhood this particular Black History Month, because my mother just became an ancestor a few weeks ago. And, you know, this is a joyous, you know, occasion for me, because it's the first time I pour water to, you know, her spirit and to acknowledge, you know, her transition. So, as we pour the libations are to give recognition to all of those individuals that have gone before us. And when we pour the libations, we would like all of you that are here to acknowledge individuals in your life, or heroic individuals in African culture that you can recognize, that you would like to give a shout out to in regard to acknowledging their spirit and their contribution to the world. So I would first like to pour this first libation to my mother, Jean Graham, that gave me life. That's the only God I really know. And all of the other gods are based on belief and faith. The God that I know, that I felt, that I talked to, that gave me life, Jean Graham. Okay, now we would like you to call any ancestor or any personality of high esteem that you feel would warrant this particular
Bertha Smith.
All right, Ashe. 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 John Henry Clark. Ashe.
Malcolm X.
Ashe.
Viola.
Viola Plummer. Ashe.
Alton Maddox.
Alton Maddox. Ashe. William Mackey Jr. Ashe. Professor George Simmons. Ashe. Sojourner Truth. Ashe. Harriet Tubman. Ashe. Clara Muhammad. Ashe. Elijah Muhammad. Ashe. And to all of the ancestors that we have lapsed in our minds to remember at this time, but all played a part in making sure that we exist today. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe out. Okay.
Neely Fuller passed away too.
Who did? Somebody said Neely Fuller?
Neely
Did somebody say Neely Fuller?
on the first.
Huh?
I saw a posting that Neely Fuller passed away on the 1st of February.
On the 1st of February? Okay. Let's make sure that we also, you know, acknowledge Neely Fuller. Without Neely Fuller, a lot of us wouldn't be here, especially those individuals when it comes down to what we define today as, white supremacy. My first term that I heard white supremacy, I heard through, Neely Fuller by way of Francis Cress Welsing. Here was a brother that really was able to live a long life, a very long life. But most of all, a long life that was a guide and a spearhead for black people, that worked the majority of his life as a laborer for African people at home and abroad. Here's a brother that you would always want to remember. If you don't have his book, I suggest that you get it. It's the kind of book that you don't want to read. It's not a book to read, it's a book to study. And you want to study it for the rest of your life, especially if you're a black person in America. And Neely is a brother that will, always be remembered because he was stalwart, one of those individuals who were on the front lines fighting real hard against white supremacy. So, acknowledgement, Ashe to our dear brother, departed, Neely Fuller. As we get started this evening, as you do know, I titled the particular topic as Nzinga, the Portuguese, Christianity, and slavery. Again, the title of the lecture was Nzinga, the Portuguese, Christianity, and slavery. And I decided to break it down into two parts, which I'll do half this evening, which is the beginning, and the follow-up, which will be on the 19th, and that the first part would be on the Portuguese and Christianity, and the second part is going to be on Nzinga and slavery. And as you can see, I'll mix some of it in, but I want to give a breakdown so that you can give an idea on how I'm going to approach the subject matter, that's all. One of the things that I want to acknowledge as we come out the gate, and that is the issue of African History Month. And that is that, and I want to be clear about this, African History Month is not left up to anybody but you. Don't get it twisted. This is not some issue that, you waiting for the white man to come teach your kids, black history in some public school. Y'all should be ashamed of yourself 300 years later talking about what the white man is teaching your kids. Y'all should be shocked. And the reality of the fact is that we have all the tools available to us. The first thing we did out of embondagement was to learn how to read and write. That was the first major accomplishment that Africans sought for, to be able to move freely through this particular society. And one of the things that we did with reading and writing was we wrote books. And we were able to begin to tell our story on our terms. And one of the things about African History Month is that it comes around once a year for some of y'all. For most of us, it's something that we engage in constantly, every single minute of our life. And I think that we should be a little bit more enthusiastic about being able to honor and to highlight and underscore our accomplishments and our shortcomings. Let me say that again. Our accomplishments and our shortcomings. African History Month is not just about to waddle in romanticism about what we did. it's also about what we need to learn from the things that we didn't do. Because if we're going to really move forward in a comprehensive and intelligent and most of all in an effective way, we all have to be on the same page consciously in order to move forward. And when we talk about African or Pan-Africanism, one of the things I think we leave out is consciousness. We talk about color a lot, as if though color is going to be the prerequisite. But it's consciousness is the prerequisite. If we ain't thinking the same, and if we ain't have all of our aims, goals, and objectives as the same, then we ain't going nowhere. So my thing would be pan-consciousness, pan-African consciousness that would put us in the same mindset so that when we do what we have to do, we can actually do it. And my thing is that I'm pretty sure all of us know that all black people ain't gonna get together and do nothing. But the ones that you do want, that do come together, you want to make sure that they all on the same page. And that we all thinking with the support that we would be honored to cover your back. And that's very important. So I wanted to start off by opening up by giving a little attention to what we support this particular month. You know, I had a guy tell me that, oh man, look at that. They Black History Month, they gave us the shortest month of the year. I said, y'all stupid. I said, you don't even know Black History Month if you think somebody gave it to us. First of all, you know. But the second thing is that who cares how many days it is? If you want it to be 31, then do 2 extra days then. 3 extra days. Stop acting, you know. I don't understand us sometimes.
2 extra a month.
Yeah, but no, not 10, 11, you know. But again, this has a lot to do with our perception of what we would like to see and what we want done. So, but as we move forward, I want to, talk this evening. First, we're going to get into the issue about the Portuguese and the Christians. And because the Portuguese and the Christians set the stage for this diabolical system that we call the slave trade on the western front of the continent of Africa. This is very important in regard to understanding what we are talking about. You know, when I use the term slavery, it's not some universal term. If I said to you, my dear in the back, if I said to you, are you familiar with slavery? What would you say?
Yes.
You'd say yes. If I asked you, Abdul, are you familiar with slavery? What would you say?
No.
He would say no. I like that. Dorothy, if I asked you, are you familiar with slavery? What would you say?
I would be familiar with some of the end of it.
Some of the end of it. Okay.
Yeah.
And Ray Ray, if I asked you, are you familiar with slavery? What would you say, Ray Ray?
Yes, I am.
He said, yes, he is. Nobody answered the most important question. No, which one? Because there was slavery was going on for a long time before that one that you talk about even started. And y'all was involved.
Yeah.
But we never mentioned that one too much. So the first thing I want to do is to identify slavery and to identify the compartmental aspects of slavery. Y'all are familiar with a term. The term is called transatlantic slave trade. Are y'all familiar with that? Everybody familiar with that term? Transatlantic slave trade. Y'all heard about that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, Trust me to tell you, it doesn't exist. There's no such a thing. There's no such a thing as transatlantic slave trade. And trust will tell you why. There's no such a thing called a transatlantic slave trade because the Atlantic Ocean didn't enslave anybody. And on the east coast of Africa, most of the scholars that write on this subject are white. As Dr. Lewis knows, most of them are white. And most of the white scholars that write about the east coast of slavery, they don't call it the Indian Ocean slave trade. No. They call it the Arab slave trade. Why? Because they identify the culprits that are involved, that are the initiators of the trade.
DEI.
Yeah, I like that one, DEI. And on the West Coast, they did not want to point the finger at themselves, so they gave it to the ocean. On the West Coast, that slavery that y'all was involved in, that was about 400 years, they call that the transatlantic slavery, but really it should be defined as the European slave trade. The European slave trade. Because diabolically, those were the major culprits that were involved on the West Coast. And starting with, again, the Portuguese. So the first thing is to acknowledge and define for ourselves how we see what took place, especially when we was involved. How you get to name stuff when we were the individuals who were the recipients, the bearers of the brunt of what went on, and we don't even have no input in any of it. As a matter of fact, they believe them more than they believe us. So the first thing we do is we throw the transatlantic out the window and we identify the people that are involved. And that means the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, the French, the Germans, and the English. All of these individuals were directly involved in the process at different times. So, and I want y'all to be clear that all of them wasn't involved all the time. How many of y'all ever heard of the 1619 Project? Anybody ever heard of that? 1619 Project. Hannah Jones, right? Hannah Jones, brilliant scholar and journalist, put together this project to identify the beginning of the slave trade. Is that correct? Anybody? Anybody familiar with Hannah Jones? Somewhat. Hannah Jones. Well, the 1619 Project does imply that the beginning of that particular system here in the United States began in 1619, and that is not true. That is not true. And how they couch it is based on the English coming into the trade. Now, those of us that study slavery know that the English came in kind of late compared to the Portuguese and the the Portuguese and the Spanish. And this is very important because it literally begins to create the backdrop for how we perceive what slavery really is. And understand who played what kind of role. Because most of us, when we think about slavery, most of us are here in the United States of America, we think of slavery from an English point of view. Did you know that the first city in the United States of America was St. Augustine, Florida? St. Augustine, Florida. That's the first city ever created in the United States. And it was a Spanish colony. Now, Florida, the state that y'all call Florida today, wasn't that Florida that when Columbus and them, the Spanish and them came, that was the Florida that you see today. The Florida, when they took control of this particular hemisphere, started in Nova Scotia, in Canada. That's where Florida started. And it went all the way down from Maine, all the way down the whole East Coast, past to modern day Florida, all the way to Texas. That was Florida. That was Florida. Not that little panhandle you see today. No, that was Florida. That would show you the influence and the impact that this particular country, Spain, had on the first dibs of what was taking place here in the United States. And then before that, you had the issue of those individuals being able to get here, you know. One of the things that we find out in the early days, and that is that this wasn't an independent operation. And a lot of times in the beginning, it wasn't done by countries. You know, slavery in the beginning were not actually instituted by countries. They were instituted by companies. The Dutch East India Company, the British African Royal Company. These are companies that went out and represented their particular, how can I say, their investment in the process of this new system that was going to bring them some loot. That's what it was all about. And one of the things that I want us to understand is that in the beginning, it wasn't about color. It was about subjugation of forced labor on anybody who didn't have something to fight against, put it like that. So to be a slave at that time, you can be white, you could be black, you could be Asian, you could be Christian, you could be Muslim, you could be Moor and be a slave. You could be a Moor and be a slave. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Moors involved in slavery. See, we don't talk about that as much. We talk about, you know, all the science they brought and all of the education and how they created, you know, the academic infrastructure of Europe, but they don't talk about, like I said, the good and the bad. Y'all heard about the trans-Saharan trade that went all the way from the west coast of Africa all the way to Saudi Arabia. Y'all heard of Mansa Musa and all of them? Well, did you know that one of the major commodities was people? It wasn't just gold. It wasn't just ivory. It wasn't just salt. Salt probably was more worth its weight than people. But then people, they were part of that process. And we got this idea that certain individuals that we hold high in esteem, they wasn't involved. I was reading some material night before last about Quakers. The big thing about Quakers are, you know, against slavery. No. Go look up, when were they against slavery? Did you know Benjamin Franklin was a Quaker? Go see how many slaves he owned. See, you have individuals that are looking at this based on whatever their frame of reference is. But what happens is that we don't know where our frame of reference is, and most of all, who is telling us an authentic story. I mean an authentic story. So when we think about slavery, we think about slavery based on the way Europeans told it to us. So this is why it's important to have a clearer, a more better understanding coming from a rooted point of view. So what I want to do first is I want to introduce to you the Portuguese involvement to slavery by way of a major document. And that document is called the Document of Discovery. Anybody ever heard of the Document of Discovery? It's a powerful document. They actually came out with two. This is a particular copy. You go to the internet and find out. This is
Let me zoom in, Trust.
Huh?
Let me zoom into it.
The year, Trust?
Say that again?
The year?
You said the year? The first one, they're called Papal Bulls. P-A-P-A-L-B-U-L-L, Papal Bull. And they are identified with particular popes of that year. So the first one is the Papal Bull of Pope Nicholas V. Pope Nicholas V, 1455. 1455. And the two that we're going to talk about is Pope Nicholas V, that Papal Bull, and the Pope Alexander VI of 1493, 1 year after Columbus came to America. Now the reason that this document holds so much power, one second, is because it defines that it answers that question that all of y'all asked about slavery and about Christopher Columbus. What's the biggest question asked about Christopher Columbus? Anybody?
Did he discover America?
Huh?
Did he discover America?
Did he discover America? Or how can he discover something that's already what? Occupied.
Discover.
Right. Now, if that be the truth, hold on one second. The issue of discovery is based on who's defining the word. Because the word itself determines what the definition or the meaning will be. So when we think about discovery, we think one thing, and when they think about discovery, they think of something else. But in this case, one of the things that it identifies was what role these individuals played. And let me read it to you. Hold on one second. Now, this is a simplistic definition, but it says this. It says the name of the papal bull was called Romanus Pontific. Romanus Pontific. It says the papal bull of Pope Nicholas V, Portugal. It was Pope Nicholas V in Portugal on January 8, 1455. Excuse me, courtesy of the Arquivo Nacional de Toro do Tambu in Lisbon, Portugal. This papal bull legally granted Portugal the right to enslave any and all people they encountered south of Cape Bojador on, hold on one second, on the coast of Western Sahara. Now, hold on one second, I just want to read something else real quick. It says that one issue in there was one that was issued in 1436 by Pope Eugenius the Sixth, and the second issued in September 21st at 1451 by Pope Nicholas V, relieving the Dukes of Austria from a potential ecclesiastical censure for permitting Jews to dwell there. Another in 1555, Pope Nicholas V praising Catholic King Alfonso, because King Alfonso was the king at that time of Portugal. And it says for the battle against the Muslims, because at that time, the Christians prior to that had ran all over North Africa, from Egypt all the way to Morocco. That was all Christian. It was all Christian. And what happened is that when Islam came birth, like a freight train, it went across North Africa and like a snowball picked up jokers all the way across the end. And today, it is still Muslim. And the Christians never recovered from that. This is where the Crusades had their beginning, because they wanted to take back their, lost land to, at that time, the guy was Saladin, who was the head of Egypt at the time. He was the individual who was literally moving the Muslims like a tidal wave across North Africa. And this was taken, and they weren't taking no prisoners. And this changed the whole demographics in regard to the religious dynamics that were taking place during that time. Now, mind you, at that time, we're now talking about the 15th century. This is the 1455, the 15th century. But at that time, you got to remember, in the 15th century, the Arabs were already in their 8th century in slavery. 8th! They were already 8 centuries in.
In what?
In slavery. Remember, they started right after, well, they started before that, but when Islam got started, you got to take into consideration, 622 is the beginning of the Islamic calendar. 571 is when Muhammad is born. The major influence happens from the 8th century all the way to now. Right now, you can go and slavery goes on in the East Coast. I'm talking about in the East Coast of Africa. This is not no hyperbole. You can go and check. And the issue is that on that coast, the East Coast, slavery went for 14 centuries. On the West Coast, 4 centuries. How come we don't know that? 14 centuries, 1,400 years. But we talk vigorously about the 4 centuries because of our personal involvement, and didn't realize that our other brothers on the other side was catching as much, if not more hell. But we don't know about it. So this is why these kind of lectures are important, because I try to find the things that normal folks don't tell you. It says another in 1455, Pope Nicholas V, praising Catholic King Alfonso V of Portugal for his battles against the Muslims, endorsing his military expedition into Western Africa and instructing him to capture and subdue all Saracens. Anybody know what a Saracen is?
Muslim.
Say it again?
Muslim.
It's a Muslim. Before you heard the name Muslim, before there was a religion of Islam, those individuals in that geographical area were called Saracens. Saracens. Think about that. See, it's think like a guy, see this This is what kind of hat? Anybody know? Yeah, but what kind?
From the area of, I forgot the area. It's an area.
No, the issue is what I'm trying to get at is this religious dress?
Yep.
It's culture time.
It's cultural dress. That means that this existed before Islam
The
existed.
average person would think it was religious.
That's right. And they issue a great deal of time. That also goes for yarmulkes and a lot of other things.
That's right.
You know, gefilte fits, bagels and lots.
Just to remind us, God Ptah, one of the ancient gods, you see him represented with that cap. Anybody wearing that cap, they're taking it directly from your God along the Nile. God Ptah has the cap. The same thing with the Muslim one. You just go back as he's showing you, you'll find it all. That's God Ptah.
And what it identifies is that dress 99% of the time has its beginning culturally, not religiously. Religious, a great deal of time comes on as part of the fabric after a lot of these already established behaviors and concepts are already in play. So most individuals that study Islam know that, you know, they were making 7 circuits around the Kaaba before there was Islam.
That is correct.
That's a fact. So did Islam create the 7 circuits, or did they borrow it?
Or Hajj.
Inherit.
And Hajj.
Oh, Hajj too, same.
Inherit.
Say that again.
Inherit.
Inherit, same thing. But again, inherit would mean in any tradition that somebody that supported you gave it to you, versus you seen somebody doing something and you took it and ran with it. You see what I'm saying? And very seldom do Islam give credit to other individuals for things they know they didn't do. And one of them is, we were talking about Hajj, the other one is Ramadan. Where did they get Ramadan from? This is not, you don't have to be a genius to figure this one out. They got Ramadan from Jews when they fled from Mecca to Medina, because remember, Islam got started in Medina, not in Mecca. Its foundation is in Medina, and everybody knows it. I'm talking about the formal structure of Islam. I'm not talking about where the first revelation was. You see? And then second is that formulation. Remember, under fleeing Mecca, they seek refuge in an Abuna, Ethiopian Christian church. That's where they seek refuge. And during the time they was there, the Christians took good care of them. And when it was all over and the flock ended up getting back to Muhammad, and one of his followers was telling Muhammad, I was trying to convert all of the Christians that we were staying with. And I was trying to convert the Abuna, which was the head master.
The king.
That's right.
The king's everybody.
And Muhammad said, you fools. He said he's already a Muslim. He's already submitted to God. He gave you a place to stay. Who are you trying to convert? He should be converting you. Because his idea of what it meant to submit to the will of God only meant in their formal fashion, as if though the will to submit to God does, in Muhammad's eyes, does the moon and the sun submit to the will of God?
Yes, they do.
Did they declare their acknowledgement, declaration to God?
Of course, he's the higher form.
Well, the issue here is that they don't have to declare anything. By nature, they are who they are.
Yeah.
Just like we are. The only difference is we don't know it. You see. But anyway, let's get back to this Declaration of Discovery. And it says and subdued all Saracens, Turks, and other Christians to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. That's what the doctrine was geared for. That whoever I came in contact with, that I would reduce them, if they wasn't Christian, to slavery. It didn't say it said, but not whether you was Muslim, Christian, to us. It says the church leaders, and we'll talk later. It says the church leaders argued that slavery served as a natural deterrent and Christianizing influence to barbarous behavior among pagans. As a follow-up to the bull Dum Diversus, the church leaders now took positions aside the crown of Portugal that it was entitled to dominion over all lands south of the Cape of Bor-Hodor in Africa. The bull's primary purpose was to forbid other Christian kings from infringing the King of Portugal's practice of trade and colonization in these regions. In other words, the church gave absolute exclusive rights to the Portuguese for trade in Africa for for goods and humans. 1455. Let me tell you how deep it was. When he gave them access to the land, they didn't even know it was land. They didn't know that there was land beyond that particular period, that particular area. It was so deep by the time the Spanish got into the game and they discovered this place we call the United States of America, which they didn't find. Y'all didn't know that Columbus didn't discover the United States of America.
Right.
Anybody know where he ended up?
Hispaniola.
Right. But he didn't end up in Hispaniola. He ended up in ID. Because Hispaniola was named by some Spanish joker, and the people that named it ID
The French.
was indigenous and they lived there. But see, we only know Hispaniola because we know the Spanish part. When did the French come? You get what I'm saying? All of these things have a role in playing how we look at these events. So when we talk about the Portuguese, we're talking about a people that looked at Africans in a certain kind of way. Let me read something to you. These guys are, on a whole nother level. This book is called The African Experience in Spanish America, 1502 to the present day. It's by Leslie B. Rout Jr. Leslie B. Rout Jr. This book was originally published by Cambridge University Press in 1976. One thing that's significant about my boy Leslie B. Rout, he was a saxophone player, jazz, serious brother. And he went down and guess what his other discipline was? He was an African history teacher. And I'm talking about one of that, I said African history historian, not teacher, excuse me. And what had happened was he was playing a gig down in the Caribbean. And he began to look around and see all kinds of different things that was going on. And he was trying to understand why this culture was doing this and why that culture was doing that. And he began to investigate. And that led to this whole study of the first contact with Africans and the first contact with Europeans during the earliest periods of our contact, or in this case, Europeans' contact with this particular hemisphere. So this book talks specifically about that and in very, very good detailed ways. You know, because a lot of times they talk about these things and they don't give you good info. So I would like y'all to bear with me a little bit. I'm going to read a little bit, but this is going to give you some insight. Again, this is the African experience in Spanish America, 1502 to the present day. The chapter that I'm reading from is called The Iberian Connection, the Portuguese Background, Prince Henry and Portuguese Control of the African Slave Trade to Europe. Now, what's significant about this is the role that this gentleman, Prince Henry the Navigator, played, and the role that the Portuguese has in the inception of slavery before they get out. Now, mind you, we're talking about this particular period of when Africans start penetrating into Europe. Anybody know how long did the Moors stay in Spain? Anybody?
711 to 1485. Right.
How long did they stay in Spain? I mean, in Portugal.
Well, it was, they took it all. Part of France, what is France? Part of what is Portuguese?
Well, they took some of France, not all of France, just the
I guess the
southern
time
part.
they left Europe, that's the time they was all out of Spain, when they left Spain.
Well, let's see. Prince Henry and Portuguese control of the African slave trade to Europe. The initial arrival of the sub-Saharan Africans in the Iberian Peninsula is an event lost in antiquity. Quite likely, a few accompanied Jebel el-Tariq, Tariq ibn Zayed, when he and his Moorish legions crossed over from North Africa, and after 6 years of campaigning from AD 711 to AD 716, consolidated Islamic rule in Iberia. Some of the defeated Christians retreated into the vastness of the Pyrenees. But during the 8th century, they commenced the Reconquista, an intermittent series of wars with the Muslims aimed at reconquering the previously held territories, as I already told y'all about earlier. It says that that by the 7th century, by the 13th century, European Christians had come to view the struggle in Iberia as a Western crusade. The papacy granted plenary indulgences to all those who fought the Moors, and this factor undoubtedly encouraged some Frankish knights to enter the fray. By 1250, listen to this, by 1250, Moorish rule was permanently terminated in the Portuguese kingdom. By 1250, that's more than 100 years is going to go by before Spain falls. Remember, that's 1250. Spain falls in 1490 what?
1485.
Say that again?
1485.
No. I said Spain falls. I'm talking about not the country, but in this case, we're talking about the Moors being being thrown out of Spain. And who comes in? The Christians. Remember? Because at that time, who was when the Moors came in, who was they saving?
The Jews.
The Jews. That's right.
What?
The Jews and the Moors got together to bust up on the Christians. Yes, sir. That's how it worked out. But let's move on. It says that in the wake of victory, the newly liberated kingdom of Portugal found itself the victim of an acute shortage of manual laborers as a result of the flight of the numerous Moors. Let me say that. It says, in the wake of victory, the newly liberated kingdom of Portugal found itself the victim of an acute shortage of manual laborers as a result of the flight of numerous Moors. What were they talking about?
Black labor.
Yeah, but the issue is it says Moors.
The Moors come and they needed people to replace them.
Yeah, but again, no, the issue is here is we're trying to think of what they are talking about in regard to rulership versus what we are talking about in regard to labor. The issue is we have in our mind that when we think of labor, we think of black people. Not at this time.
That has not always been the scenario.
That's right. At this time, if you was a Moor, shit, a white Christian could be a slave. But see, we're not thinking like that because when we hear the word slave, we think black. But let me go on. You'll see what I'm talking about here. It says the end of the major warfare meant a reduction in the number of slaves for Christians and Muslims captured in battle and had been subject to ransom or condemned to a life of servitude. Even during the conflict, the increasing likelihood of Muslim defeat forced many believers in Allah to flee the country and take up residence in Granada, the only area of Iberia still held by their co-religionists. In addition, several hundred years of recurrent fighting had seriously diminished the native population of the area. During the centuries of bitter struggle, the black African, let me say this again, the black African had become known to the Christians essentially as a soldier fighting for the Moors. Let me say this again. This is important because we think black, they're going to be brothers. No! We're talking about, when you see Moors, you think of them as black. Let me ask y'all a question. Did the Moors call themselves Moors? No. Where did they get the name Moors? Was it a pejorative term or was it like the word Rasta?
Pejorative.
Was the word Rasta something indigenous to the Rasta community?
No.
Of course not. Was it a pejorative term? Was it a derogatory term?
No.
Was the term Rasta a derogatory term? Go ask any Rasta and they'll tell you that, Leonard Howell and them will tell you that the term itself was to identify an individual who was unkept. They used the term Rasta as a substitute for the word dread. Dreaded. And then what they did, Rastas did the same thing black people did with nigger. We embraced it. We run around calling each other niggers. I'm saying that this says something. It says that during the centuries of bitter struggle, the black African had become known to the Christians essentially as a soldier fighting for the Moors or as a slave laborer.
Black Moor.
No, the issue is that this is trying to get us to understand how the term Moor is being applied in certain settings that are different than what we thinking they are. There are terms when the term Moor really just means black. And then there are times when the term Moor is a noun. It means person, place, or thing. That means it's a religion, it's a culture, it's a language, all of that.
And geographic.
Right. And then after the Moors are taken out of existence and they are put to the background, that term literally goes into another evolution and literally only is used as a term identifying an adjective, a color connotation. So everybody in Europe after that is called a Moor. Oh, blackamoor, Moor. Otherwise, just talking about an outward appearance versus a Moor, most of us think Muslim. You heard of Saint Maurice, right? Was he a Muslim? No.
No. He's earlier than the Muslims.
Huh?
He was early. There was a Roman general.
No. Yeah, that's right. Not a Roman general. Maurice was from Egypt, and he became the patron saint of Germany.
Yeah.
Black as midnight.
He was called the Moor later, right?
Now, he was called the Moor. They call him Saint Maurice the Moor. That's what they call him.
The black Moor.
Right. See, my thing is not the issue of who only the Moors were, but how did we get the term? When did it come into existence? Did everybody use the term the same? Because obviously when you read various books, you'll find out that the term was not used the same over various spans of time. That's a fact.
Very loosely.
Very loosely. And my thing is, when they write stuff like this, they show you that if they're talking about a guy who was running the country who was a Moor, and they talking about a black African, they gotta say, well, the black African is a black guy from the South, and the Moor is what?
No.
You get what I'm saying here? He's not looking at the Moor in this case as black. He's looking at him as a ruler, a person who has taken position as, taken this individual as position as bondage. And this is why I said to y'all before is, how many of y'all know about the Moors involved in slavery? Nobody ever talks about it, but they was involved. Shit, they ran a freaking country for 800 years. 800! In the whole North Africa, they was the biggest business men during the time. They didn't just develop education, they developed business too. And think of what the major commodities that were coming into Europe at the time. Humans, animals, all of the amphitheaters. How do you think they got lions in the frickin' in the what do you call it, the Colosseum? Where they get them frickin' elephants from? Where they get all of these? They ain't no animals. They running around talking about olive oil. Ain't no olives growing frickin' breed. None of them. They grown. Olives came from North Africa.
Morocco.
They know it. The problem is that it's given the impression as if though, oh, these things were just available. Oh no, that's not how it worked. But let me go on. I'm diverse. Okay. It says that a few Portuguese traders traveled to the Barbary coast. There, they bought blacks. But the cost was high because control of the trans-Saharan trade routes rested with desert tribesmen who delivered the captives to Barbary coast middlemen for sale. Aside from an occasional raid on Moorish vessels by Portuguese pirates, purchases from these Muslims, dealers represented the only way Christians could obtain black slaves. Christians was buying slaves from Moors? Come on! This is what I'm saying. And look, this is no belittling the development of the impact of what Moors had on the society of Europe. But it also falls short if we don't tell the whole story.
And what year we talking about again?
Here we're talking about, at this particular time, we're talking about the 15th century, the early part of the 15th century. Now, again, this is what I'm saying. By the 15th century, where were the Muslims? See, because when we think of Moors, we don't think of Arabs as being Moors. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. They think that as soon as the Arabs got to North Africa, from Egypt to Morocco, they became black. I'm telling you, this is what they think. And then when they left from Sutra and jumped over to Andalusia, all of a sudden, the greatest thing since sliced bread. Now, my thing is that nobody that studies history don't know one thing, and that is that Europe would never be Europe without the Moors. Everybody knows that. But everything that they did wasn't great. Just like everything that the settlers of this country didn't do was great. Let me tell you, just to regress for 1 second. I live in Newark. I went to the Newark Museum on Sunday with a friend of mine. And we was going to the planetarium, but I found out that they had a new exhibit set up on slavery. So I go see the exhibit, and I'm looking at, you know, some of the material and this, that, and the other. And they have this big sign up there that talks about the transatlantic slave trade and all of that. I was telling the guy about how I got a pet peeve about transatlantic slavery. So, you know, after I was explaining to him, you know, my reasoning in the material, it was talking about how they had a picture, a big picture. It was like the size of this whole, as a matter of fact, the size of all of the kente cloth. That's how big the picture was. And the picture was of George Washington. And he was in this big gala. And it was all dressed up and, you know, all regal and everything. And the caption for the picture said this. He said that this is a picture that was put together of an event that never existed. And they said that it never existed because they wanted the world to see that the president and the environment they live was at a particular stage. Now, I was really taken back because I knew about this. I got a book at home about George Washington, and one of the ways that they wanted you to adhere to who George Washington was, they made George Washington into a godlike figure. I swear to God, they got a picture of him in the heavens with wings like, you know, no bullshit, with
Like
angel wings on, right, with the halo and stuff around him, and little, and little angels, you know, around him, and people looking up at him like this. And I'm saying to myself, now I'm looking at the picture and all I can see is 390 something slaves. That's all I can see in my head, you know. Now everybody else looking at it, shit. Not remember, the father of our country, the father. Remember, whenever you use the word father, leader, the man, the top dog. You understand?
Papa.
Now, he was a guy who never went to school. Y'all didn't know that, right? George never went to school.
Never?
Never.
That's that
Never.
Never.
He didn't get out of
Never.
That's never.
Never. Right. Listen, you know how many of them jokers, listen, they barely could read and write.
Donald Duck in the White House?
Yeah, well, that's a different story. That's a completely different story. But one thing that I can say is, y'all better buckle up and strap in, because these next 4 years, they gonna be a doozy. Y'all can believe that, you know. Now for black people, we all know one thing. That's right. We like roaches in the world, goddammit.
We know pain.
That's right. And even when they bring the raid can, we like, man, that shit don't mean nothing. You know what I'm saying? We on that kind of level. But we need to begin to understand what role we play and really work for our own interests. Not work for Democratic Party's interests, not work for, Joe Blow's interests, work for our interests only. Because everybody else, that's how they working.
That's right.
They not working for everybody's, they working for their interests. And we have to prioritize our interests. And let me explain this. I'm not talking about prioritizing by getting the Black Caucus to do it. That's not what Trust is talking about. Trust is talking about you taking responsibility with these two hands and this butt and this mind, right? And getting your ass up and getting something done. You understand? Don't cry about what they ain't teaching your kids in school if you ain't teaching them nothing. If you ain't teaching them nothing, you better shut your goddamn mouth. That's our problem. We too busy begging the white man for everything. Like he really gonna do it. Like, man, this is the guy that stole your ass, brought you all the way here, raped, robbed, killed your ancestors. These are the individuals that demoralize you, dehumanize you, and then you giving your kids to them and say, here, teach them. What the hell that sound like? Y'all should be strapped up on a tree, swinging on a swing.
That's right.
Because y'all don't realize that the only way you gonna get liberation, you can't legislate it, you can't demonstrate it. That's right. The only way you get that kind is you gotta. That's right. Talk about it, Dr. Lewis. That's the only way. And if you ain't doing it with that kind of enthusiasm, sit down and shut the hell up. For sure. But let me go on. This is getting interesting. It says that during the wait a minute, hold on. It says during the centuries' bitter struggles, the black African had become known to the Christian essentially as a fighting soldier. Oh no, I read that. Let me see. Oh, okay, I know him. The combination of technological advancement in ship navigation and construction, a favorable geographical position, keep me on time, Brad, position astride the Atlantic Ocean and Africa, and the belief that the Reconquista could be successfully pursued in Morocco were among the factors which fueled a 15th century Portuguese policy of discovery and expansion. In August of 1415, let me say that again, in August of 1415, an expeditionary force seized Sutra, that's in Morocco, a major terminal on the Trans-Sahara trade route. Let me say that again, on the Trans-Sahara trade route. Remember, Trans-Sahara trade, that's a very important trade route that supplied the majority of North Africa with Southern Africa products. And then took those products not only way from there to North Africa, from places from West Africa to North Africa, but all the way to Saudi Arabia. That's where you get the story of Mansa Musa, who literally devalued gold by going throughout the whole Trans-Sahara trade route, giving people gold. This is how much gold this joker had.
So it was in a capitalist.
They said today he still would be known as the richest man on earth. Today. It says that on the Trans-Sahara, it said in keeping with their past history, the Portuguese claimed that they were fighting a holy war since until the 7th century AD, all of North Africa had been Christian. Until the 7th century, all of North Africa was Christian. See, y'all didn't understand the significance of why the Crusades happened. What was they really about? They was gangsters. It was about territory. They was gangsters. Let me tell you, it says that they were supported in their pretensions by the papacy, which urged general Europeans, listen to this, which urged general Europeans backing for Lisbon and authorized a newfound plenary indulgences for the combatants. That means they was ready to fight. They didn't give a shit. Nevertheless, Portugal could not immediately follow up its initial success with another campaign. Moreover, one important personality viewed the frontal attack in Morocco as only a part of a gigantic effort that would be needed to smash the Islamic states on the Barbary coast. This was Prince Henry, later named the Navigator, Duke of Viscu, who became the commander of Ceuta in 1418. Prince Henry the Navigator. Y'all heard of Prince Henry the Navigator?
He learned about the seas from the African pilots.
No, he ain't learned nothing. He didn't know how to sail no ship. Let me tell you this. Prince Henry the Navigator never went to sea, never went on a ship. And he was given the title of the Navigator.
How?
Because he financed the ships. He created schools. He was the, let me tell you, he was, no, let's get it right. He was the Elon Musk of his day. He was the Elon Musk. Prince Henry the Navigator. Listen, it says that he intended to sponsor exploratory voyages down the western coast of Africa, hoping to discover some way by which the hated Muslims could be taken in the flank. In 1420, he became director of the Military Order of Christ, a post that provided him with the financial means to support his ambitions. Curiously enough, his first efforts were not directed against the followers of the prophet, but against the neighboring state of Castile. In other words, this guy went after a Spanish setup. He didn't go after a Muslim state, he went after Spanish setup. But think about this. It said that fearing that the latter kingdom might attempt to occupy the recently discovered Madeira Islands, he dispatched Goncalves Zarco and Tristeo Vaz to seize them. The settlement and annexation of these territories in 1419 and 1420 represented the true beginning of Portuguese colonization in Africa. Again, we say in 1419. 1419 is a big difference from 1619. 1419 is a big difference from 1619.
It's a practice.
And I want all of us to understand that even today, the white folks got upset at Hannah Jones because she said everything started at the inception of this country started at 1690, saying 1619, 1776, and all this kind of stuff. So the next time the white folks say that shit to y'all say, oh no, 1415, 1419. Your ass wasn't even here. And matter of fact, you was a alien, you was an immigrant. I mean, these crackers is crazy, man. It says, one great question confronting Henry and all Europeans at this time was what lay beyond the Madeira Islands? Now remember, the Madeira Islands are right off the coast of West Africa. And the issue was, what was west? What was back down all the way out there? And they didn't know.
You have to understand, the world was flat. They would fall over.
Well, that's what they. But what he's saying is correct. That's what a lot of them thought. Until they met a lot of the African mariners that were coming back and forth to Canary Islands, Madeiran Islands, and all of them. And like Columbus runs into, because Columbus is, he was a cartographer. He was a map maker. And what he did was, he married this woman who was, her father was one of the individuals who owned a supply shop on, I think, the Madeiran Islands. And the Africans would come in there and tell him about this land on the other side of so-and-so. And they didn't know nothing about it.
They didn't believe.
Right, didn't believe him at all. So when he told the story to Columbus come and asked the joke. He said, yeah, man, you just keep going, you're going to hit some land. Don't worry about that. You know, right. But the issue was, as the brother said, they had this idea that if you went too far in the ocean, you're going to fall off on the other side. And this is what gave Columbus and them the incentive and the enthusiasm to say, well, shit, if they could do it, we can do that shit. You know what I'm saying? And they did it. The only problem was that Columbus came here three times. And every time he went back, he failed. Every time. And when he went back, what did they do the last time?
Jail him.
They threw his black ass in jail.
He wasn't black.
Huh?
What black ass?
How you know?
I don't.
Again,
He's Italian. He was Italian.
No, he wasn't. Again, this is the idea. The biggest question now is whether he is actually Portuguese or Italian. Let me ask you this question. How all of us...
Hold on. Didn't they say he was Jewish also?
Nah.
Yeah, you could be Jewish and Italian, you could be Portuguese and Jewish. It don't make a difference. Yeah, but the issue here is that in that particular period of time, you got to take into consideration where, when, and who was running the show. So what do you think?
The Pope.
Huh?
The Pope was running the show.
The Pope was running the show. And remember, the Pope literally dictates policy in regard to how you define yourself. Go ahead, Brother Lewis. I'm sorry.
I was just reminding us which we will sharpen up the concept of nationalities. What we call Spain, if you look at what you call Spain, most of the countries, if you look at Europe, Western Europe, that you see a distinct border to say he's Spanish or Italian. Those borders didn't come in less than 100 years ago. You're talking 300, 400, 500 years ago. So I just want to throw in, so we'll clarify, because I'm confused, so that's why I'm listening. When someone says to me, he's Italian, he's this. Yeah. Italian didn't, that country, what you call Italian didn't exist back then. Right. There was no Germany.
That's right. Not
just
like that.
To throw in that what Professor Mackey said. You ask yourself the question, why is it that Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, and others, the languages like almost identical? You have to remember the Germanic invasion.
That's correct.
That came down on what you call that part of Europe, that part of the landmass you were talking Portugal and stuff. They border Africa. Those people who you call in French, Spanish, these are Germanic tribes that came down hundreds and hundreds, disorganized Germanic nomadic people. When you're talking about the Moors coming in, The Moors already has hundreds, if not thousands of years. Let me just put this, what you call science here, that's what your ancestors were doing at the time the Moors go in. Surgery, iron, all of this. So it's just to sharpen us a little bit. So around the time of when we Africans lost, okay, let me just shorten it up. The 1400s, there were no European countries you recognize. You couldn't find, there's no Europe, there's no France, no Germany, doesn't exist. And just to add another little bit, I'm just rambling a little bit. In Egypt, in one of the Holy of Holies, forgot exactly when they have 7 Holy of Holies, and one of the Holy of Holies is God holding up the sextant. You know what the sextant is? To navigate. Africans were when we went into Spain and Portugal, they were Germanic, this connected groups of people, tribes. There's no such thing as cities and agriculture and culture. It didn't exist. That's why as he said, Europe, the more civilized Europe. So the point is, just when we're talking to sharpen you up, at the time the Moors come in, when we were there for 700-800 years, you brought to Portugal the sextant. You came, you showed them the sextant, you learned it. They didn't know how to build boats. The Africans, the Moors, or whoever, they built all of these European, they brought the shipbuilding, they did the navigation, the routes, everything were African. Just to flavor it up so that we understand that we can't look at what we call a European now. They were nomadic tribes. That's why they always fought each other over the years. And the closest they started with civilization is when the Moors came in. We showed them, we did shipbuilding, we showed them how to build ships, how to navigate, the whole bit.
And not to belabor that, but the Romans and Greek, they had an empire civilization.
Yeah, but the Africans already civilized, the Greeks long, but just remember these big history periods. When Dr. Ben writes it down, when you're talking about the Moors, the Africans are already left Egypt, went all through Asia, put in universities. And let's one little thing. If you want to see the extent of what Africans have done, just look up all of the pyramids around the globe. And you'll see the antiquity. So these Europeans, you call them French and English, they're late in the game.
Nature knows no culture.
Okay. Where I left off. One of the great questions confronting Henry, meaning Prince Henry the Navigator, and all Europeans at this time was what lay behind or beyond the Madeiran Islands. Old and semi-mythological accounts suggested that a great deal did, although there were no specific details. Gomez Inez de Surara, whose chronicles are the most knowledgeable records of Portuguese explorations up to 1450, provides a mixed assortment of motives for Henry's sponsorship of voyages beyond that point. And these are 5 of those motives that Henry used. One was the zeal for knowledge. In other words, they were searching for something that they didn't know. Like Dr. Lewis was telling you, well, Africans were seeking, Europeans were seeking Africans at every turn because they wanted to learn about the world. It's not something that was peculiar, it just happens to be the order of the day. Second, it says the acquisition of gold and other forms of wealth. In other words, they was looking to make their pockets full. We talk about Europeans here now. It says, third, the solicitation of converts to Christianity. In other words, their position was, we're going to make all of these jokers not Christians because of Christ. We want them to be Christians, so their bidding will be to us. That's what it was about. It ain't got nothing to do with Christ, none of that. It's about you going to be working for me, boy.
Spending your money in my store.
Right. 4, it says the vanquishment of the followers of Islam in North Africa and elsewhere.
The what?
It says the vanquishment of the followers of Islam in North Africa and elsewhere. In other words, our main objective is to kill all of them Muslims. And last but not least, number 5, the establishment of contact with Prester John, the legendary black Christian king. Anybody know why these jokers, the Portuguese, went out looking for Prester John? Anybody have any idea?
You say he's a king?
Yeah, he was a black king of a Christian community.
He was a mythological figure.
That's correct.
His kingdom was wealthy. They're probably still looking for him. This guy.
But they was looking for him for a reason.
To convert him.
No, he was already a Christian. They didn't have to convert him. Right. Anybody?
Yeah, I can hear you, Cal.
Now, let me explain to you why. The reason that the Portuguese were looking for Prester John was because they were looking for an ally to fight against the Muslims. And the Portuguese wanted a black ally who was consciously their brother. In this case, Prester John was a Christian. And they was going to be Christian, black and white, fighting against Moors. You get what I'm saying? That was the major intent. It says, while some of these aims may seem pompous and hypocritical, they must be considered in the context of their times. For several centuries, Europeans had been purchasing not only blacks, but also quantities of spices, ivory, and gold, thus from Barbary Coast dealers. Given their monopoly over the supply of these products, the Moors could charge Europeans whatever the market would bear.
Economics.
Again, it was about the money. You understand?
Real time.
These guys, look, they playing for keeps. They know what the game is. They understand the value. Let me give you some last, and then we're going to start winding down a little bit while I tell you the impact of the role the Catholic Church literally plays in the imagery of why and how we get caught up into this this diabolical trade. Yes, ma'am.
So am I to understand at that point in time that black people were not looking at the way we are now, but they were really revered and on top?
That's well, it did, yeah, but at different points. There were certain black individuals they looked at as rank and file, cut the mustard. I wouldn't want to be next to them, you know, right. And then you had the other black, like Moors and individuals who were elite, you know, people of aristocracy. These were individuals who had all of the loot, all of the power, and all of the influence. So you didn't have no alternative but to look up to them with a degree of awe, because they was running the show.
And they had the money, and they had the know-how in terms of the oceans and ship making and everything.
Well, during that time, they had a great deal of influence in those particular areas. Remember, because when you talk about North Africa and you talk about Southern Europe, the only thing that separates them is the Mediterranean. That is one of the major means of transportation and trade. So remember, in the ancient days, what becomes major in regard to any population is water. Without water, there's no population. And one of the things that water also played was a means of transportation to move product from one place to another.
Right, you see, when you mean water, you mean boat, like being able to get on a boat and go from one place to another?
Yeah, not just get on the boat, but also have water for survival necessaries. In other words, no community, no human community can survive without water.
Exactly.
Right, so you have to be somewhere. The only added feature for modern day humans is that the technology now provides us with certain things that where we don't have to be close to water, but we know how to get that water from where it is to where we're at.
Inland.
Now, mind you, the modern day concepts that they use to irrigate and to move water around, they got from ancient Egyptians, because they were the first ones that came out with what were defined as irrigation techniques for large bodies of land. And these particular routes, these particular water techniques that they used, that they created, became the order of the day for everybody all over the region. The problem is that today most people don't know where they came from. They think that their people developed it, when in reality, it goes all the way back to the Nile Valley.
When you mean people don't know where they came from, you mean what, Black Americans?
No. With a concept of using that particular device. Let's say you got a particular bucket with a spigot and a weight on the back. That came from somewhere. Right. So that using that water, dipping it in, and the weight itself is doing this. Or the water that has a wheel. Same, right. All of these were techniques that were originally developed in Egypt because, one, remember, the Nile was hydro power. You get it? It was hydraulic power. And the Africans knew that at an early time.
What does hydro mean?
Hydro, in this case, we need meaning something that is propelled by water. Right. And in this case, the significance of what these water bodies mean. In Africa, we think of the Nile, but you had the Zambezi, you had the Senegal, you had the Kwanzaa. How many of y'all know of the Kwanzaa River?
Never heard of it.
Ooh, next week we're going to talk about it.
What country is it?
It's in Angola, but it's originally from the country of Ndongo.
Never heard of it.
Ndongo Angola is named after Ndongo. Ndongo's king was named Ngola. N-G-O-L-A, Ngola. That was his name. Just like this name here, Nzinga. That's not her name, that's her title. You had kings that were Nzinga that were men. As a matter of fact, 5 kings before her were all men.
Never heard of that. I thought that was a woman's name.
They also, the significance is, you got modern day Congo, you got modern day Congo Brazzaville, or Democratic Republic of the Congo. Do not get that mixed up with ancient Congo. You got Ndongo and Congo. Congo is north, Ndongo is south. Ndongo is where we today call Angola. Congo is further northwest. It's closer to what we would call to the Atlantic. Where all of the countries that we see today, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Congo Brazzaville, and Angola, are further east in where they are today. It's like ancient Ghana. Ancient Ghana versus modern day Ghana. Ghana today of ancient Ghana is 600 miles northwest. It's in between Mauritania and Mali. That was ancient Ghana. They wasn't Ashanti. Today, most people in Ghana, Ashanti, Earwig, Ga, whatever. You go to ancient Ghana, they Soninke people. They speak Soninke. They never speak no Ashanti. And Ashanti ain't a tribe anyway. It's a combination of 8 tribes that came together in the 16th century.
Ashanti is new.
Yes! Ashanti is nothing old.
It was the Gold Coast that Nkrumah chose the ancient African name of Ghana.
Right, because Ghana was the name of a king. That's where he got it from. That's where Kwame got it from.
That's for his newly independent nation.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Interestingly enough, I have this photograph in my wallet of my mother on March 6, 1957, fighting for Ghana's independence. I'm show it to you.
That's powerful. That's real powerful. What country got their independence before 1957 in Africa?
Egypt.
No.
Nasser.
Say it again. Say it again. Trust me.
March 6, 1957. Meet the Anderson.
Wow. Dressed in the draping of the flag. I ain't mad at you at all, my brother.
My grandmother, one of the earliest Garveyites.
Get out of here. See, these is real black women here.
Right.
These is real black women here. These black women here, these is real. Wow. And they come from right inside this room. You understand what I'm saying? Powerful, bro. Powerful. You know, these are the kind of things y'all want to know. I bet you y'all don't even know that there was a guest at Kwame Nkrumah's there was a guest at Kwame Nkrumah's inauguration that came from this country. And he hung out with another guy who also was from this country. Anybody know who it is? Very famous black man.
Martin Luther King.
That's who it was. Martin Luther King went to Kwame Nkrumah's inauguration, and guess who he was hanging out with? Richard Wright. Wow. Richard Wright. Richard Wright wrote a book on Richard Wright writes a book on the inauguration. It's called Black Power. Go look at it, you Google it. Richard Wright, Black Power.
Is his daughter still alive? She's writing too.
Richard Wright?
His daughter
I'm not sure. I didn't even know he had a daughter, to be honest.
I think she's alive.
You know? Well, if she did, that's good stuff, you know? But the reason I mention that is because a lot of times when we see major events take place, sometimes we don't realize what the connections were. And here's a connection that was actually there at a time where nobody would never ever associate Dr. Martin Luther King with revolutionary Africa. Nobody. Who would do that?
Connect the dots.
Right. But it just shows you that Martin Luther King, as well as Kwame and Malcolm and all them, was all on the same page. And sometimes the reason that they didn't know was because they didn't follow each other's events. You understand what I'm saying? As time went on, when Malcolm got older and Martin got older, they began to come closer. Because they began to see that the enemy ain't either one of them. The enemy is the white boy.
That's correct.
And they realized that. And what that meant was, look, let's stop this, let's join forces, and let's join a knockout punch to this joker the right way. And before they could even think about getting it done, they knocked them both off.
You already know.
They knocked them both off.
That's how they conquer, that's how they do.
The object is we should learn from that lesson, and that is protect our leaders. Protect our leaders. Our leaders should die, not be killed.
Got that right.
They should die, not be killed. I would like to see our ancestors laugh at individuals that go after our leaders because they're going to live to be 100. Name a leader that you know that lived to be 100.
Alexandra might do it. She's 99.
Think about it.
Not many.
Yeah, but to think about it, you can only name 1 or 2. And the reason that is because 99% of our leaders die from exhaustion, overworked. They listen. We kill them.
And underpaid.
Broken heart.
Underpaid and not recognized.
It's sad in nursing homes, in hospitals.
In
That's
jail
what he
cells.
died.
Jail cells.
Not died, we giving them all great love and support and everything. We do that after they dead and we cry. We talk about how many flowers we want to bring. While they was living, we ain't do shit. Dr. Lewis will tell you about Professor Simmons, Dr. John Henry Clark, Doc Ben, Amos Wilson, Alton Addicts, that's right, John G. Jackson, all of them, Chancellor William, nursing homes. All these black people, we running around talking about Black History Month.
You know, Billy Fuller died a couple of days ago, I think.
Yeah, we heard about it. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And the issue here is that it just shows you how we appreciate our leaders. We appreciate leaders the same way we appreciate church on Sunday. When they're doing something for us, they're great.
Question.
Yes, sir.
But maybe we don't have a philosophy, we don't have a program for them as they get older. We can maybe put them somewhere or protect them somewhere.
The issue is we got enough intelligence from now to next weekend.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be talking about this.
Yeah.
When you go back and look at, I'm talking about the ones we know. We can go back to Fred Douglass and all of the rest of them. All of them died poor, man. Name a rich revolutionary. Name one. See, the revolutionaries fight for somebody else. You don't even recognize him as a revolutionary. Elon Musk is a revolutionary. Y'all might not think of him like that, but homeboy is a revolutionary, and he getting job done.
Question. So what? So how old is Minister Farrakhan? He's like 91.
91, something like, or maybe a little older than that.
Might be the oldest one.
Yeah.
Still kind of like
Right. And the only reason that you can give him credit for that was he lived long enough to learn the lessons of what took place. Because remember, all them jokers I just named, they died right in front of his eyes. Farrakhan watched them all die.
Right.
And the first thing he said, well, shit, I don't want to go out like that.
Right.
Think about that.
It's not good.
But you got to remember is that not Farrakhan 90, but Elijah and all them, they was never killed. Elijah died.
Natural causes, right? No, natural causes.
Yeah, but he died from bronchial asthma and all of that shit. But the issue was he died on his terms, not on their, somebody came in. That's right. And these are the things that we have to begin to learn the lessons of history about. That's why I keep telling you that African history is not about just the good things. It's not. As a matter of fact, most people don't learn lessons from the good things.
Well,
They learn the lessons from the
Did they say Amos Wilson had that problem with First World? They was always talking about Egypt, how great they was, and he was telling them.
Yeah, but you know, Amos was on a whole other level. That's my dog, man. Don't listen. Amos.
Right, and he told them that all the people in Egypt wasn't kings and princes.
That's right. That's
and
right.
They got mad at him.
Right. That's right.
Somebody
Well, he was given
Well, not only that, there was too many abandoned buildings in Harlem for them not to have one.
But again, just like what he's saying is that when certain critiques came up, this became an issue in the hierarchy of the Afrocentric community. And we all know that there were camps that were created. You know, whether it's the East Coast camp versus the West Coast camp versus the mid-section camp. Now, I'm not talking to you about something that I heard. I'm telling you about something I know. And I got documentation on it, you know, written by these individuals about other individuals. Now, it's not an issue of going around telling dirty laundry. But the issue is that we need to learn from these lessons so that we repeat them. You know, the greatest thing that ever happened for African people during the second African Renaissance in America, which was from 1980 to about 1995, and that is Doc Ben and Deacon them took 800 people to Africa. Let me say this again. 800. Marcus Garvey took no one, didn't go himself. Not one. You hear what I just said? The only person during that time that took somebody to Africa was Paul Cuffey. Paul Cuffey took 38 individuals to Sierra Leone, and when he got back, he contracted malaria and died. The American Colonization Society took his idea and went to Liberia. That's where you get Liberia from. Paul Cuffey, a black man, a Quaker, a shipbuilder. Half the people don't even know about him.
Had money too.
Yeah, he was a bad brother, a serious businessman.
Ships and everything.
Garvey was trying to get to Africa, right?
Yeah, of course. We're not saying this is not an attack against Garvey. This is just an issue of the realities of what we think happened versus what actually happened. Go ahead, my brother.
What Dr. Ben did, and Dr. Lewis and we go back, is liberate the mind.
That's it.
See, he liberated the mind by showing you having a hands-on view of what the Africans had done.
Yeah, but you got to remember this. Doc Ben, all of them was Garveyites. Every one of them. Doc Ben tell you straight, I'm a Garveyite.
Of course.
Right. And what he got in regard his aspects was his cues from Garvey. Because Garvey was everything is African. I'm black first. A lot of y'all didn't know. Did you know that Garvey was a Catholic?
No.
Yes, sir.
But most Caribbeans are.
No, not all Catholic. Most of them are.
Coming out of the Caribbean islands, they Catholic. All my friends.
No. Well, some are, but not all of them. A lot of them are Protestants and Anglicans, right. And tell them why they're Anglicans.
British.
That's right. Case closed.
They are British.
And Anglicans are who? What kind of denomination?
The Christians.
Yeah, but they're not Christian denominations, they are Protestants. An Anglican comes from the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church was started by Martin Luther. No, Martin Luther started it. Henry VIII is the individual who created the formal church. Remember, Martin Luther is the guy that took the 93 Theses and nailed them against the Wittenberg fucking door. And he was the individual who fought against the Catholic Church and they throw his ass out. That's how the Protestant came to be. How Henry VIII got that shit. Listen to this. Henry VIII was literally bumping a white prostitute by the name of Anne Boleyn. She was a hoe. And it was the hoe that told him that he loved this woman so much he wanted to marry her. At the time he was married to Catherine of Aragon. Aragon is a place in Spain. You got Aragon, you got Castile, and you got Granada. And he was the head of that particular, she was from that particular area. And her uncle was the king. And he was the friend of the Pope. So when the King Henry VIII wanted to divorce Catherine and marry the hoe, and when her uncle found out about it, he was like, oh, hell no. That ain't gonna happen like that. So what did he do? He nullified the whole thing. So you know what King Henry did? He said, I'm gonna find a way. So Anne Boleyn went and got a copy of Martin Luther's Bible. And in the margins of it, it said that the real representative on earth for God is the king. And Henry liked that shit. That's right.
I wonder why.
He liked it.
That 95 theses, when I was about to graduate from Monte Carlo, I did this one course. There were about 20 blacks in the class. They reached outside into the hallway, and the professor said, you had to do this 30-page paper to graduate. The next day, I was the only one, and I wrote my thesis on the Wittenberg Cathedral. Which is where Martin Luther posted his Wittenberg
That's
Cathedral.
right.
So, yeah.
He was a what's the name monk at the time. Yes, he was.
If I stand and I will not recant.
Some of these movies that's out, you can catch some of the history of the Christians.
Yeah, well, you know, I haven't seen the one. I want to see this conclave they got out. The conclave is a good. For those that don't know about Christian denomination, the conclave is about, you know, Christian bureaucracy. And if you don't know anything about Christian bureaucracy, it's a kind of movie you would want to see the fundamentals of how things operate inside this institution. Because a lot of times when we think of popes and we think of, you know, these kind of individuals, we think of individuals that are untouchable in retrospect. But in reality, a lot of these individuals are some of the most ruthless individuals that ever lived in existence. And they call themselves popes. No, I'm telling you, look, I'm not telling you something that is frivolous, that's fictional. I'm not telling you something that, you know, I heard on the internet, or no, I'm telling you something that I have researched immensely. And there's enough information in so many different areas to support what I'm talking about. And if you don't think I'm lying, just look up one book. It's called Crimes of the Popes. And in it will give you an outline in regard to, or the dark history of the popes. That's another one. I mean, there's just so many books that deal with some of the escapades. Like, for instance, I told you what we just talked about in this history today of the Portuguese. When I talked to you about Pope Alexander VI, do you know who he really was? Pope Alexander VI. He was the individual who actually split the world in half. There was a fight between the Portuguese and the Spanish on who was going to get the land. So what the Pope did to settle the situation, he split the whole world in half. He used the Atlantic Ocean as a demarcation line. Anything west, he gave to the Spanish. Anything east, he gave to the Portuguese. And it began to be such a big problem because the Portuguese had already had full control of South America, or in that case, Brazil. And they said that if you fulfilled the contract of that first papal bull, then you would encompass my area that I already own. So they amended that particular treaty in 1493, and they came up with the Cetera, that's the name of the Treaty of Cetera. And in that treaty, what they did was they gave the only part on the East Coast that they gave to the Portuguese because they had already owned it. And the Spanish got anything that was west. But the guy, his name is Pope Alexander VI. And as you know, all popes take names when they become pope. But his original name, his surname was...
Which?
What? I thought he said. Anybody know what the surname? One of the most famous families in all of Italy. And they was one of the most ruthless.
Portuguese. Was it the
That's right. They were the Borgias. The Borgias. The Borgias and the Medicis, or the Medicis, the Medicis. These was ruthless, bro. Ruthless.
About that.
Bro, y'all go to, what is that? Netflix? Is it Netflix? That's the name of the movie, right? Netflix, they have a whole movie series, right? That's a series, right? On the Medicis and on the Borgias. The Borgias was ruthless. I mean, real ruthless. But before we end, I want to share with y'all some material. I have a few books for sale.
Yeah, another 15. Another
15? Okay.
15, 20 minutes.
We have Nzinga, African Warrior Queen. One thing that's really beautiful about this book is probably one of the first done this particular queen in depth. Prior to this, there's no real book that goes into detail about her in depth. And the best thing about it, Linda Haywood is a black woman, and she is vicious. She know her stuff, you know. This Linda Haywood, and this goes into detail. A lot of material that I'm going to discuss next week in regard to slavery, Christianity, and then we're going to talk more about Nzinga, and that is the role she plays as a military strategist and as a political negotiator. She is brilliant.
What country is she out of?
She's from Ndongo, which we today call Angola. Right. And in Ndongo, she was the powerhouse. She whooped the freaking Portuguese, bruh. 40 years! 14 years she whooped that ass. Let me tell you, what I tell you about the difference between leaders that are killed and died. She died at 83, she died! And whooped that ass for 40 years. I love her, she bad.
Nzinga? In that book, they didn't want to give her a seat, and then
that's right.
The brothers made a seat for her.
No, they didn't say they didn't make a seat. Let me tell you how that worked, Ray. Her warriors,
right,
look up her so highly in esteem that they would never allow anybody to belittle her. She went into negotiation for a major treaty. When she gets into the room, the Portuguese had to stay sitting in this big regal chair talking about, you know, what we gonna do, this, that, and the other. So Nzinga looks around like, well, where the fuck is my chair? Like that. So he looks at her and says, well, you don't need a chair, stand. And when her soldiers heard about it, they immediately went into action. Knelt down, bent over, and made her sit on them. Bruh, she whooped that ass intellectually.
In that book?
I'm telling you. You can find that material in this book, and you can also find some material in this book. As a matter of fact, let me just...
Or you could tune into the Saturday group.
You could do that too. That would help. But I wanted to show you...
Is that E-N-Z-I-N, Z-A-N-Z?
Yeah, but don't worry about that because you're going to see it spelled a variety of different ways. So it could be spelled J, or Z, or, you know.
Different ways.
Yeah, you'll see it. And a lot of that is because a lot of those individuals didn't know.
He is going to check the source. Who's the other gentleman?
No. I wanted to.
Is that discussion of black civilization?
Yeah, this is. And in this book, they got a very good chapter on Congo and Ndongo, which is, I mean, it's a small one, maybe about 6 pages or something like 6 or 8 pages, but it goes into detail. Chancellor does his thing. You know, the problem is that most of the people that read Chancellor Williams, they don't really get into this kind of material.
Then they got the bibliography, right?
Yeah. I was trying to find this freaking picture. I thought I knew what the freaking page is. But that is not the page. But the reason I'm saying that is because she was such a gallant sister. And they tried to do everything to her to get her to bend. They kidnapped her 2 sisters. They did everything. And she wouldn't bend a little bit. And they was just pissed. She was so deep that they thought they killed her. And she let them think that shit for almost a year. And then when she surfaced, it was like God coming from the freaking hell. They were like, Where the hell did she come from?
Where did she go first?
Bruh, it was so beautiful. She was such a brilliant strategic statesman that, you know, a lot of times we don't give her the credit for you know, who she and what she really accomplished in such a very small period of time.
Y'all don't like us, but we bad.
That's right.
And men don't like us, but we bad.
And I don't know why I can't find this damn picture. I can't find it. But anyway, that's again, anybody want that? That's $18. Yeah, $18. And then 2 Shaka Diop books. This one is not for sale because that's mine. And that is Towards the African Renaissance, Essays on African Culture and Development. I don't have to mention to you who Shaka Anta is. I mean, look, bar none, one of the best in the business. Also that, and then this book is now available again. It's been out of circulation for about 31, 32 years from what I'm familiar with. And that's Cultural Unity of Black Africa. Originally from, I remember Haki and them was originally publishing one of this, and then who else published it? It was Kensington. Kensington published it, and then this copy, as well as this copy, are done by Carnac House. Anybody that know Carnac House is a publishing company, black publishing company coming out of England. I used to deal with them back in the 90s. And they were, back then, they handled Teofilo Obamba's book. And he was really upset with them because they had spelled words in the book wrong and, you know, some typographical, you know, mistakes and all that. And his position was, come on, man, you're a publishing company. That's the shit you do. You don't put, you know, the only person that ever happened to me was one day, I was with Dr. Scobie. Dr. Scobie had A&B do his last book for him, and on the front cover they spelled the word repatriation wrong on the cover. I was like, yo, man, what, like, come on, the cover? How you spell the word on the cover wrong? Well, that's the idea. I mean, proofreading, but now, you know, it's harder now to do that. To spell a word wrong on the book than years ago. You know why?
The computer.
That's right. The computer gonna pick all that shit up.
It's going to get a heavy book on England, Black England.
That's right. Yeah, that's called Black Britannia. Yeah, I got a copy of that. That was his first book, right, Doc? I'm pretty sure that was his first book.
I got that.
Yeah, that's blue copy, hard copies back in the day. Yeah, it's good, really good stuff.
Yeah.
You know. But last before least, I just want to show you something in regard to some current events. And that is, how many people have seen the Gladiator 2 movie?
Oh, Denzel?
Yeah. Anybody?
Yes.
Okay, anybody? Did you see it?
Denzel Washington.
Okay, does anybody know what the movie is about?
It's about the fact it's not about race, but about strength.
Gladiator 2.
Yeah, no, no.
Class order without color being the issue.
Say that again?
Class structure and class order without color being the primary yay and nay.
Well, no, it's really about rulership.
Part 2, right? It's part 2 of Gladiator, right?
Say that again?
It's part 2 of Gladiator.
Yeah, it's part 2, but even part 2 and part 1 had a theme to the movie. You know, it's about something.
Slaves.
It's about rulership. You know, the first movie is about Marcus Aurelius. You ever heard of Marcus Aurelius?
Little bit.
No, you gotta go read Marcus Aurelius. You know, the reason that is because these is white boys that, you know, put themselves in certain categories. You know, like you use the term philosophers. Well, it's the same thing. Marcus Aurelius is not just a military leader, he's the philosopher. So most individuals, somebody drops up? Most individuals looked at him not only as a military individual, but a strategist. So when you talk about him, his family, remember, it was him, his family, his daughter, and his son. You know, the son was a weakling punk. You know, that was Commodus. And the daughter, she was cruel and wicked, but she was pretty and, you know, that kind of stuff. And the only joker she liked was Marcus Aurelius' main general, who was Maximus. And Maximus literally was the individual who was fighting for one thing. He was fighting for Rome, but he was really fighting for his family so he could take his ass home to his wife. That's all he wanted to do. That's all he wanted to do. And the issue is that throughout this scenario that goes on, there is this fight for honor, royalty, aristocracy, all of that kind of stuff. But in the second movie, this is where Denzel comes in. Most of us, one of the things that had came out when the movie, the coming attractions first came out, white people got upset, and they was upset because they felt that how is Denzel in this movie playing a Roman emperor? Now, mind you, again, that's because white people don't read just like your ass don't read. They think black people, the only ones don't read. That's bullshit. The majority of people don't read, I'm telling you.
Amen.
Right, now, let me just say this. The movie opens up, as soon as the movie opens up, it says Numidia, 200 AD. Where the hell is Numidia? That's exactly North Africa. Now, in other words, the movie is literally based in North Africa. And then Denzel is playing this individual, Macaris, who is the individual who goes after gladiators. Now, the only problem is that they went after Denzel because they was like, how this Negro playing, this black guy playing an emperor? I mean, playing like he gonna be an emperor. Y'all heard that? Well, they didn't know that Macaris in real life was a black guy. They didn't know that.
They didn't read.
Right. Did you see who was the kings in the movie? You didn't see the movie?
Not yet.
Oh, you didn't see, but okay, I thought you seen it. Well, in the movie, the two kings, the emperors at that time, are brothers, and they call them twins. In real life, they wasn't twins. And in the movie, they white boys, but in real life, they wasn't white boys. Let me show you who they was. The white boys, the guys who this is the picture for y'all. This is right here, this gentleman right here is Septimus Severus. Septimus Severus. Septimus Severus. This is him, Doc.
The one who laid out London.
That's right. That's right.
What they did.
That's right. In other words, what Doc is saying is that this is the only man that ruled London, ruled England at the same time he was running Rome.
They had 3 to 4 Roman emperors. What happened?
Right.
Because most of Europe, Rome wasn't a culture without Africa.
That's
Just
right.
like you look in America, you see white and black. Without Africa, there is no Rome.
That's right. Now, the significance of this shot is showing you that this shot, this one here, this is also one. This is also one. Right? Now, these are all individuals that he's not a Roman. He was born in Numidia, North Africa. This guy here. And the guys that you see in the movie are his 2 sons. That's Caracalla and Geta.
But yet,
and in the movie, they showed off white boys. Now, and matter of fact, in the movie, they're not only white, they look a little gay too.
oh my God.
But the thing about the significance is that most of us, when we watch these movies, we feel we don't have a role to play. That we not in, that if you watch a movie on Rome, everybody in Rome gotta be white. Which is impossible. Why would it be impossible for everybody to be white in Rome?
Rome was many nations, many conquered lands.
No, because
Rome is young.
yeah, but no. The reason that was because Rome was a metropolitan kind of city, just like New York.
Everybody went there.
That's right. Everybody went there. So it would have been almost impossible. It's like saying that New York was only white.
When there's the capital of the world.
That's right. It's impossible. Right. But that's not to negate the fact that there were individuals of particular power influences that were of a particular hue or a particular aristocracy or family line or so forth and so on. But what happens for a lot of us is we watch these things and assume that they are history without checking.
The real character, was he gay?
No, not then. The part that Denzel played was not. No, I'm talking about the guys that played his father and those individuals. But one thing that I will say more than anything is that it was one of them kind of epic movies they made, Dr. Lewis, like the Ten Commandments or the Ben-Hur or one of them Cleopatra. It was on that kind of level. You know, they used the extras and, you know, yeah, it was really one of them real powerful kind of pieces, you know? Yeah. But either way, you know, I want to end there and I want to thank y'all for listening to my...
You got a couple of more minutes.
Okay. Anybody got any questions y'all want to ask me in regard to
I think when you said the Muslim Ramadan was from the Jews, and from my understanding, the word itself, I think it's a Persian word. So I would think that in people in that region.
Well,
but definitely a lot of stuff in Islam is carryovers from old traditions.
Well, all those traditions that were already, like for instance, praying toward the east. Originally, they played toward Jerusalem.
Oh yeah, before the
they was like
because the idols.
Well, no, the issue because the reason they stopped praying toward Jerusalem was because they had a beef with the Jews about the area in Medina where they was given having particular kind of ceremonies and stuff, and it became an issue for individuals. Where that when that jumped off, Muhammad, what they did was they have a mosque somewhere there that has two what do you call them? Well, I can't remember. No, they when you call a prayer, there's a little like when you go inside the mosque, there's a place where I can't remember the name of that damn thing. No, it's but anyway, what they did when they changed the direction where you would pray, it's the only mosque that got two of them. There was one that was in this direction, and down they got one in that direction. Where that prior to that, they did not. All the mosques only had one, but they got one was because originally it was in one direction, and then when they changed it, it went into another direction. But the other one was the fasting because most of at the time, Muhammad was saying that they needed something to regulate how the Muslims was health. They were taking care of their health. And they said that a lot of them jokers was, you know, eating crazy, doing crazy stuff, you know, like so forth.
Like burying female children alive.
Yeah, well, they did that because of what? You know why they did that? Because they looked at women as burdens. Because most Arabs were nomadic. And if you take all this extra weight with you, and it ain't gonna do no work, to them it's just extra weight.
So when did Islam come to Africa?
He stopped that.
When did it come to Africa?
Way later, right? They were tribal religions, right?
No. Well, see, the issue is when they came as a group. Most of us in the historical community use 640 or 639 as the date. But Africans and Arabs had already been crossing the Reed, which they all call the Red Sea, which originally was called the Reed Sea. They would cross that, but it wasn't in large numbers. You know, they would just cross it, you know, small trading and shit like that.
Were Africans practicing Islam?
Was Africans practicing Islam? Not at that time, because there was, you know, Islam was just, it was just getting started. That was 639. Go ahead, Doc, I'm sorry.
Just to make small comment. When the question was asked about the dispute between Amos and Dr. Ben, one of the consider one of the questions that Amos asked, why, if you're taking all these people to Egypt and you're spending that money in Egypt, maybe that money should stay here to build a community? Dr. Ben's basic reply was that what he was attempting to do very successfully is by taking you to Egypt and showing you the connection between Egypt, what is in Nubia, what is Ethiopia now, going back to Central Africa. So by taking you to Egypt, he gave African people globally Egypt. The world began to see, with all of the Europeans and Asians questioning of what is Egypt, when Doc said that I'm raising the consciousness and level of Africans globally, and not only globally, but in time. What am I saying? You go and you get a number of Dr. Ben's books. One of his books, you asked a question about Islam. One of his books is Africa, Mother of Western Religions. You call three Western religions. You have Judaism, Christianity, Islam. It all comes out of Egypt. The writings, the concepts, the stories. So when people say, well, the Muslims here and the Jews here, and it all came out of Egypt. That central language group, African religion, you call it, came right out of Egypt. That's the purpose. So when God directed us to Egypt, you could now go back in time and say, you see, look at the pictures, look at who they are. Egypts are Africans. Africans are people who live in Africa of all colors. He clarified so that your mind is clear so that you can challenge anything. Okay. The Egyptians come in all colors.
Arabs too.
Okay. The Nile is the end product, as Dr. Ben would teach us, of that great civilization that you see along the Nile. It didn't start in Egypt. It didn't start in Nubia. It started in Central Africa. And it went in both directions. You have similar structural ideas in Egypt. You have it in Southern Africa. So it is in Egypt. So he showed, by taking you, he said, I raised the consciousness. So by taking you here, you can clearly see there's Egypt, there is Nubia, there is Central Africa. When you further deal with what you call Egypt, you're going to find, you go on, this is how he made the connection. You go on your internet and you look up wherever you can find pyramids around the world. Look it up. Pyramids in Central America, South America, pyramids in India, pyramids in Afghanistan, pyramids in Japan, pyramids in every place. So you can now see anybody ask you the question. You want to see the oldest structures in the world, the oldest religions in the world? Look at the pyramids and you'll see Africa, 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 Africa. Dr. Ben tells you when you start reading his book that Muhammad, he was a worshiper of female goddess because most of the goddess were female worship. So what is you have a Bible? So-called Jews, all out of Africa. What are Christians? Christians use the Old Testament and then they add on the so-called New Testament. And what are Arabs doing, Muslim? They take the Jewish, they say Jewish part, then they take the Christian part, and they take the Arab. So your Quran is supposed to be three. It's three things. It's three separate religions. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They all come out of Africa directly. That's what Dr. Ben was doing when he took tens of thousands of people to Egypt. He showed the world that anything that you see created in the world came right out of that continent. And that was the rationale of why Doc took so many people to let you see. Any questions you have about anything, you can find it. Origins in Africa. So it wasn't an argument between Dr. Ben and Amos Wilson. It was just Dr. Ben clarifying to Amos Wilson what his strategy was. And you know, that's what it is. So anybody come up with any book, anything talking about the white and the act, you find it right there.
Take them to Egypt.
You right there, you have the proof of who civilized the world, because you have hundreds of pyramids, hundreds of burial mounds, statues in every part of the world. There's no other group of people other than you. You can't argue about the origin. And I say one last thing. So what Doc did was he put you there, and you have to get his books. Africa Mother, Western Religion, Africa this and that. And most of your questions are going to clarify. And when you go there, you go to Egypt, you'll see it. You'll see the short statue of God is God, God is best. It's both male and female, that's the Torah. So everybody's looking for here and looking for there. It's right there. And that's why he put it. So if you don't pick up his book and his books and start with that, and you'll be to really send to you. Because this concept in Spain and Portugal about who was a Moor, who was a Jew, why is it that under the Moors, the so-called Jews were not persecuted? Because they were no different color than the Moors. The Jews, you say, in that area, it's black people. So what Dr. Ben tried to do is to let you see Africa. You're going to find Africa in everything that you're talking about, in the Arab here, in the Christian here, in the Muslim here. So you make sure you get some of Dr. Ben's book. He's got some basic classes out there. So that you could be able to analyze when people say, where are most, and I'll end here, why he's put us on that track, where are most Africans living in this world outside of Africa? Where? Oh, it's Brazil. Second that. Okay. You go to India right now, what you call India, and the Indian government officially recognizes the people, the African people who are now living in Brazil. 95% of Indians are you, the lighter skinned ones and the darker skinned. And according to the archaeology and everything you can find, the oldest people there are called the people of the beginning, the Adivasi. Indian government, look, yeah, Adivasi. There's at least 175 million people who are recognized as the indigenous people in what you now call India. Almost 200 million look like any one of us. They call it Adivasi. People of the beginning. India has started out as an African country and still is an African country. So the largest group of Africans, you call Africans, living outside of Africa, is 80% of the people in India. Those are you. Light-skinned ones, dark-skinned ones. And I just say that just from what Doc started us. I'm not taking the credit away from anybody. But in terms of you want to know about Africa, contribution to the world, etc., etc., you start with Dr. Ben's books and you fan out there. You ask the Indians, Japanese, the Koreans, who are the Koreans? Who started Korea? Those people who brought Buddha here. It's all there. So the people run around and this one did this and the white man did this. By the time the Moors went in, 711, and they were pushed out in 14-something, those groups of Europeans who were in what you now call countries that didn't exist then, 1400. Spain, there was no Spain, there was no Portugal, there were no formalized countries in Europe. Europe was just a bunch of hundreds of scattered principalities killing each other.
Yeah, try right down.
Okay? And so there was no such thing as Italian and this and that. And I'll end by here. I got in a big trouble. In the hospital once, they wanted to I can't tell you what they want to do. At Grand Rounds, they were discussing sickle cell. And there's a condition I can't, that Italians and Greeks and a few of these other people get, it'll come to me. So I said, the reason you can't, I asked them, why can't you distinguish between sickle cell and what you call African and the identical condition in what you call Europeans?
Where they go? Tay-Zac?
Pardon me?
Not Tay-Zac, is it?
No, it's,
They're out of us.
no, I just had it in my mind. The point is, what you call sickle cell, it's in Africans. All of the Europeans in the Mediterranean area has identical clotting mechanism. I can't think of the name.
But they say sickle cell is not a biological, it's a geographical disease.
What the point is, you start testing people's blood today. And you're going to find that what you call sickle cell in Africans is identical to
Greeks,
to what the Europeans, the Italians, the Greeks, they all got the same condition. What does that tell you? They don't want you to have the admission of the fact that Africa was all over. So that's what God gave you, and Brother Trust is bringing to you to do some. You gotta do some research and you gotta do some reading.
Thank you, Doc.
Because this is fantasy stuff that these white folks are talking about.
This the elder teacher here. Y'all make sure that y'all pay attention.
All right, give Brother Trust a great big hand. And give Dr. Lewis a round of applause. Zoom audience, next week, Dr. Lewis is gonna do part 11 on the Sahara region, and then Brother Truss is gonna come back on the 19th with part 2 of the lecture today. So